thought I'd stop for a moment and let you all know that that I will submit to the Baltimore City Council the name of Michael S. Harrison to lead the Baltimore City Police Department. He is the police chief, was a police chief in New Orleans. He will retire from New Orleans with one of the highest reductions ever in the history of that city. He has been working on their consent decree for a number of years. He understands the similarities between us and New Orleans and Baltimore. I think he is noted as one of the top police chiefs in the country, and I think that he will come here to Baltimore. He will spend a great deal of time in neighborhoods and communities and having community conversations. I have taken in consideration all of the questions and concerns that citizens of Baltimore have had. I've had consultations with a number of business people, community leaders, conversations with elected officials, including two who are standing here with me, about what Baltimore needs. I want you to know that we had a process, and the process began right here in Baltimore, where I was privy to the experts of the PERF organization that focused on what Baltimore needed in terms of a police chief. That began, and I think you all should please take some notes so that you can understand what the process was, because people seem to think that this was an entirely closed process, and it was not. It began here in Baltimore in April, where I met with PERF, who explained to us clearly what was needed and how we needed to attract a police chief. And they said in order to attract a police chief, you needed a process that they will feel comfortable in coming in and having conversations. They also invited me in May to their conference in Nashville, Tennessee, where they set up a group of advisors of police chiefs across the country who spent at least 2 hours with me conversing about the needs of Baltimore and giving advice on what we should be looking for in a police chief. In their conversation with me in April, they said that not only can we provide you with top-level police chiefs, but it had to be a process that they would feel comfortable coming into. And, you know, I say to company presidents of organizations and even those of you who are out seeking jobs, I don't think you tell your boss before you leave that you're seeking another job. And so it was still very uncomfortable, and I think, Bill, you know this, that it was still uncomfortable for some of those police chiefs. And so with the advice of at least 5 major police chiefs around the country, and I will say this again, the charter requires that the mayor make the selection of police chief. But what the charter doesn't say is that the mayor should seek advice. And so I don't think that there's an appointment, whether it is Parks and Recreation, our health commissioner, which I'm down to 3 candidates, that I've not sought the advice of experts. I am not an expert in policing, and so I thought it was important to get the advice of police chiefs from around the nation, from LA to Miami to Portland, Oregon, Detroit, Chicago. We had experts who sat in that room and gave good advice. And so we are going back. I went back over the last week understanding where Fitzgerald's situation was going with his son, and unable to come here and meet with the community and talk with the community. And because I think it's important that the community hears from the nominee what his intentions are, what his plan is, and engage with neighbors and community members throughout the city. That process will take place. Fortunately for us, some individuals have already had an opportunity to meet this commissioner. And I think if you read any of the latest press around this individual, he is one of the top police chiefs in the nation, reducing violence at its highest. I think it is in over 40 years in New Orleans, has consent decree experience. And so I look forward to sharing him with the Baltimore public. And let me just say this, you know, the process was intense. And for some folks, just very, very too intense. And so I can tell you that not only did we, after the advice of PERF, and receiving their conversation, met with 7 police chiefs right there when I was in New Orleans, in Nashville, Tennessee, that they introduced me to. And we've also met with folks individually. It was easy to have a conversation with this particular commissioner. He is retiring from New Orleans. Most of us don't retire at the age of 49, but he is retiring from New Orleans. He has notified his mayor, and so we will proceed forward. Mr. President, I want to say thank you again for being such a great partner. We've had these conversations, and Senator Ferguson, thank you for your advice and your partnership as well. So with that, I want to thank you all.
Why wasn't Harrison your first choice? What was the thing?
I don't think it's about, so let me just say this to you. I'm giving advice, okay? And there's a process that has to take place. And some people were not willing to come into this process without complete confidence that their names would not be leaked out. And so until an application, Harrison was suggested by many people, and in this conversation, he was on track to reduce violence at its highest level. The numbers don't come out, the numbers end in December 31st, and I think that he is a great choice for Baltimore.
Are you saying he was hesitant about coming
I'm
here?
not, what I'm saying is that he is the name that we are submitting. I think you can have those conversations with him.
Chief Harrison, I understand, adapted some of the Chicago's crime reduction programs
Yes.
in New Orleans. How important did that play a part in your decision making?
Well, let me just say, they're doing many of the same things that, as you well know, what Chicago is doing now on its track to reduce violence at its highest. We're doing some of those things already, as you well know. The strategic decision centers, we've got it up in the eastern, up in the western. We need to spread it. We have gunshot detection. So he's adapted some of those policies, but what he is going through, and he spent a great deal of time with the consent decree, there's nothing more important to us right now than implementing and doing what is said in the consent decree, and also reducing violence in the city. That is most important. So to be able to attract a police chief who is reducing violence at its highest rate, I think bodes well for Baltimore.
Mayor,
Can you tell
to
us
be
what the
clear, at the
conversation
time
was
in
over the last
November,
weekend
when you
between-
made the decision on Joel Fitzgerald, at that moment, are you saying Michael Harrison was not available?
Did not have an application, no.
So he was not, he wasn't willing to go through that process
No.
at that time?
Not at that time.
Can you explain to us the weekend, the decision from knowing that Fitzgerald might pull out to this conversation with Mr. Harrison?
Yes.
And how that went with Mr. Harrison, knowing that the panel had suggested him at first?
Well, let me just say this. The process is that you fill out, let me just say this. The conversations this weekend went very well. Mr. Fitzgerald's situation gave, and I tell people, as a mayor, you always have to look at all of your options, because we are in dire straits to make sure that we stay on this trajectory to reduce violence. I know the paper said homicides went up to 309, but homicides actually went down from 343 to 309. So we have experienced a violence reduction in the city. In fact, in our violence reduction areas, the 7 areas of the city, we've actually dropped homicides by 23%. We actually had to pick up 13 from years as far back as the 90s, where we actually reduced homicides by 296. So the conversation was easy to have with someone that you develop a relationship with. Thank you all.